Of the many things Pinker is doing in Enlightenment now, one is giving an intellectual history of the Enlightenment period. The purpose of his doing this is to bolster his own worldview by identifying it with some of the most beloved figures in the Western canon. So let's look at Pinker's intellectual history to see how accurate it really is. This is how Pinker defines the Enlightenment in his book. The Enlightenment is conventionally placed in the last two-thirds of the 18th century, though it flowed out of the scientific revolution and the Age of Reason in the 17th century and spilled into the heyday of classical liberalism in the first half of the 19th. The era was a cornucopia of ideas, some of them contradictory, but four themes tie them together: reason, science, humanism, and progress. What Pinker doesn't state explicitly is that in talking about the ideas that characterize the Enlightenment, he isn't talking about the ideas held by the majority of the people from that era, but rather the ideas held by famous philosophers from that era. Otherwise, his thesis would be too stupid even for someone like Pinker to believe. So let's take a look at those famous philosophers and see if they match Pinker's definition. Let's start with Immanuel Kant, the author of the essay, What is Enlightenment?, which Pinker cites in the book. Kant was certainly an advocate for reason, but he thought that we need to critique it and rein it in because it has an innate tendency to overreach its bounds and produce illusions. Kant was also certainly no humanist. He saw no value in human happiness except insofar as it is granted by God as a reward for living morally. So how about David Hume then? Hume didn't think reason was capable of providing humans with a basis for action. He thought that the foundations of ethics and science came from our instincts, to which reason is a mere slave, to use Hume's word. What about Spinoza then? Spinoza was no humanist because he didn't see human beings as essentially distinct from the universe as a whole. And Spinoza thought that good and evil were merely relative concepts, so the idea of there being progress in any objective sense was wholly alien to Spinoza. Then, of course, Locke made God the basis of his political philosophy, Descartes made God the basis of his epistemology, and so on and so on. Even Voltaire believed that the will was only explainable on the basis of God. Pinker goes to extreme lengths of sophistry to preserve his definition of the Enlightenment. Take the case of Rousseau. Rousseau rejects reason, science, humanism, and progress quite explicitly in his second discourse on inequality. So how does Pinker get out of that one? Well, he simply defines Rousseau as a romantic thinker, even though Rousseau was writing in the period that Pinker defines as the Enlightenment. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's not necessary that every Enlightenment thinker advocate for reason, science, humanism, and progress all at once. Pinker is providing a loose model of an Enlightenment thinker that the various thinkers approach to differing degrees. But that presupposes that Pinker's four criteria are even an interesting or illuminating way of thinking about the Enlightenment. If you actually read these thinkers and attend to the questions that they're grappling with, questions like the nature of substance, the conditions of knowledge, the limits of property rights, the possibility of immortality, and so on, you see that Pinker's definition of the Enlightenment isn't so much wrong as completely missing the point. In fact, the only thinker for whom reason, science, humanism, and progress are of central concern is Karl Marx. Marx thought that through reason, human beings could come to understand both the natural world and the social world. And unlike Kant, Hume, Locke, and Descartes, he didn't think God needed to intervene to make this possible. This meant that Marx had a strong commitment to science. Throughout his writings, Marx draws on physics, biology, history, and economics to make his arguments. This is why Marx identified himself as a materialist. He thought that what was most real about the world was that which is revealed to us by the empirical sciences. Also, if anyone qualifies as a humanist, then Marx does. Marx believed that humans have an unlimited capacity to transform nature and society to better suit their needs. Furthermore, Marx didn't think that humanity needed to subject itself to any standard given by God or nature. Marx thought that humanity could produce its own standards directly out of itself and then strive to realize them. This, of course, committed Marx to a belief in progress. Marx saw history as a gradual struggle for humanity to liberate itself, first from nature and then from tyranny. He thought that this progress towards freedom would continue into the future so long as we stuck to our reason, our science, and our humanism. So how does Pinker characterize Marx? Here's one quote from Enlightenment Now. Karl Marx possessed no wealth and commanded no army, but the ideas he scribbled in the reading room of the British Museum shaped the course of the 20th century and beyond, wrenching the lives of billions. Now, just in case you think Pinker is using scribbled and wrenching in a neutral sense, here's one more quote. Countries could deal with terrorism by deploying their greatest advantage, knowledge and analysis. Ideologies that justify violence against innocents, such as militant religions, nationalism, and Marxism, can be countered with better systems of value and belief. So just when Pinker gets his golden opportunity to identify a thinker that perfectly fits his model, he runs in the opposite direction. And why? Well, that should be obvious to everyone at this point. Pinker is not doing scholarship in Enlightenment Now. He is doing propaganda, specifically the kind of propaganda that will get Bill Gates to call you his favorite author, or that will get the Koch brothers to invite you to conduct lectures at their think tank. Pinker's wife is a philosophy professor. All he had to do was roll over in bed one night and ask her if Hume was a champion of reason, or if Rousseau wrote during the Romantic period. Perhaps he did. Either way, it wouldn't matter, because Pinker isn't out to educate his reader. He's out to deceive his reader, and, unfortunately, he's proven to be extremely good at doing that.